It was actually a little bit more. I think that there was a lot of fear and concern going into the inauguration. This is the first inauguration that has seen the Capitol ringed by 25,000 National Guard. There was a lot of fear of violence in the day, and America faces a number of pretty serious challenges. And so that the speeches could turn on such a note of hope and healing, that was actually a little unexpected that it could be such an uplifting moment.
And Nicole, we've just reported Joe Biden wasted no time in getting to work and reversing many of Donald Trump's key policies. How significant was this action?
Pretty significant. I think it tells us a few things. During the Obama years, there was a lot of obstruction in Congress. And so Democrats learned a lot about how to do things using executive power. But I think it also shows that a lot of the achievements of the Trump years actually were done through executive orders and therefore easily reversible, as opposed to legislation, which would have been much more difficult to undo.
What does returning to the Paris Climate Agreement actually mean for the US?
So it's a starting point. The U.S. is going to have to pass significant legislation if it actually wants to meet the goals of the Paris Accords and to do much about climate change on its own. It's not something that the Congress has moved very much on in the past. There are obviously some pretty comprehensive pieces of legislation being proposed, but with Democrats only holding 50 seats in the Senate, there will be a lot done in the executive branch, like joining the Paris Accords, but the really hard work might not happen right away.
Well, Joe Biden kept his promise when he tweeted in July last year that on his first day as president, he would rejoin the World Health Organization. And we've just seen the WHO's reaction to that. What difference will this make to the world's handling of the pandemic?
I think it's pretty important that the U.S., which first of all, has a serious crisis of its own when it comes to coronavirus, but that it's going to be part of the international effort to respond to this virus. This is a global pandemic, and it's not going to be solved piecemeal on a national basis. And so the U.S. being engaged both at home much more, but also abroad is going to, I think, make a big difference, especially when it comes to vaccine distribution.
Well, his opponents are concerned about how much all of this is going to cost, including the $1.9 trillion recovery package for coronavirus effects that still needs to pass Congress.
They are, although during the Trump years, Congress spent an overwhelming amount of money. Our budget hawks come home every time there's a Democrat in the White House. And we're at a point now where deficit spending is exactly what the United States needs in order to get out of the coronavirus crisis. So I think that there probably is more political will for this than it sounds. And some of that concern about spending that has suddenly appeared now that Biden is in office is more about politics than about economics.
And Nicole, as you mentioned, even though Democrats have control in the House of Representatives and the Senate, there will still be obstacles in passing legislation. What will some of the challenges be?
The biggest challenge is that in the Senate, according to the current rules, to get legislation to the floor, you have to have 60 votes. That means getting 10 Republicans on board. There is some legislation that they can pass through something called reconciliation, and I think you're going to see that used much more over the next 4 years in order to get really significant legislation passed. It has to be budget related. So there are some things like voting rights that can't be done that way. But I think you're going to see that tool used a lot more.
And just finally, how will the new rules on mask wearing to battle coronavirus work exactly? And will most Americans abide by them? How will they accept them?
So this is an executive order, so it really only applies to areas under federal control, but it does do something pretty important, which it sets a standard for mask wearing and an example for mask wearing. This is a really politicized issue in the United States, but if we can at least get the symbol out there and the message out there, I think that will make at least some difference in the use of masks.
Nicole Hemmer, always good to talk. Thank you so much for joining us, especially on this important day.
Thank you so much for having me.